Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, continuing on with going over all the Lodash functions, because why not? So now we're at the date category, which is only one function. It says now, so I'm assuming it just gets you the current date, which the number of milliseconds that have elapsed since. So again, assuming that this existed before the date thing existed in JavaScript. Okay, I mean technically you could, let me see what the difference would be. So first let's console log what we get if we do now. Just want to see what the difference in output is versus the built-in JavaScript date object. We get that. Now if I do new date, save, we get the exact time, although I'm pretty sure there's a function for turning that into milliseconds that's escaping me at the moment. I think maybe if you just do .utc, let's see if I did that. Nope. But not important enough at the moment, but damn it, curiosity killed the cat and I gotta look it up. Okay. Turning date to milliseconds JavaScript. Because I know how to get the date, the month, all that stuff, but I never need to get the milliseconds, so. Get time, yep. New date for current date and get time to return the milliseconds from since January 1st, 1970. Okay, so that's dot get time. Let's do it. And there you go. Okay, so it's the same thing as now. Cool. I mean, if you have Lodash installed, I guess that's one way to do it. I don't find that one particularly useful, but again, a lot of these functions I feel were created before certain changes and additions to JavaScript, because this is an older library, so I probably don't appreciate them as much as I would have like 10 years ago. After. Okay, so these are function functions. So the opposite of before, this method creates a function that invokes func once it's called n or more times. Interesting. Let's think about this. Arguments: the number of calls before func is invoked. The function to restrict. Okay, so let's see here. Var saves profile after done saving. Var after saves dot length. So saves is twice, profile settings. Okay, for each saves function async save type. Done. Console log done saving. Dot for each saves okay, so the way I'm reading this is it's going to, once something runs the number of times of the array, which is 2, this function will run, which I get, but after what? So var done. Oh, I see here. Okay, so when it's complete, done. So async save type. So once we invoke this 2 times, then the second time it'll actually run the function. So let's make an example. I don't think I'll just make another function over here. So we'll call this const rumple. Or actually we'll say Beetlejuice. Yeah, I'm gonna spell Beetlejuice wrong, but whatever. Okay. Beetlejuice equals. Okay, and let me just see how that was constructed again. Dot after saves length. Okay. Dot after So after you say Beetlejuice 3 times, Beetlejuice after 3 times, then it's a callback. Console.log. It's showtime. Okay, so the idea is that after this gets called 3 times, or this gets used 3 times, it should then basically run that function. So let's see here. How do we want to do this? I will just use a quick loop for I equals 0. I is less than 3. I plus plus. And basically what it'll do these 3 times is say Beetlejuice in a variable, const say Beetle equals Beetlejuice. And let's run that. And I'm gonna, yeah. I'll leave the time there, it doesn't matter. Unexpected token, okay. Oh, that's right, these are semicolons. So I got so used to like for of loops and using for each that I'm forgetting basic for loops. Jeez. Okay. So it runs the loop, but it's just not, let's understand what's invoking it. So complete async save type. Let's read this again. The opposite of before, this method creates a function that invokes func once it's called n or more times. Let's just do this. Beetlejuice. 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 Now if I just do that, let's see what happens. Oh. I spelled it wrong once. Then it has too many letters. I gave it too many T's. There we go. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Still. Do I just need to call it as a function? Is that it? I think so. There we go. Yep. Okay, so once I call that function the 3rd time, it will do the thing. Okay, that's what I thought. It's just the example here didn't quite show the function being invoked. But that works for me. Okay. You got it. So again, this function gets invoked 3 times. It's going to run this function. Very nice. That's actually a really cool function. And I'm assuming before does the exact opposite, so I'll skip the before for a moment. While we're there, creates a function that invokes func, with this being binding argument. Well, it's called less than n times. Subsequent calls to the created function will result in the last function. Will result the result of the last invocation. So basically, only run it until you hit the 3rd time. So after Beetlejuice, the 3rd time, it won't let you say Beetlejuice anymore. Okie dokie. That could be useful in certain situations, like you only got like in the game we only have so many attacks. So you basically you attack the 3rd time, you can't attack again. It creates a function that invokes func with up to n arguments, ignoring additional arguments. Okay, so let's see your map. Dot parse int with 1 argument. That's an e. And so the function to cap the argument for, which will be parse int. Just take 1 argument. Oh, I see. Okay, this is part of the map argument. Okay, I see. So it's going to parse int for each one. I got it. Okay, that's. You're just limiting the amount of arguments that can be passed into it. I think that's not an issue anymore. But okay, I'm not quite sure why I would need that, because usually the additional arguments get ignored anyways. I'm assuming there was a time that it wasn't, that would create a runtime error. Bind creates a function that invokes func with the this binding of this arg and partials prepended to the argument it receives. Okay, that's in JavaScript now, but or value which defaults to monolithic builds, but may use this is just to bind a particular function to a particular object, so that way that thing becomes this. So in that case, here's find where they do it, bind. Okay, so we're saying here the greet function is bound to this object Fred, so that way whenever this is used inside that object or inside that function, it gets replaced to Fred. That's all that is doing. Okay. I mean, with arrow functions and stuff like that, I don't know if that's really all that useful anymore. Bind key. I'll just skip those. Curry creates a function that accepts arguments of func and neither invokes func returning its result if at least arity number of arguments have been provided, or returns a function that accepts the remaining func arguments, and so on. Okay. So var curried ABC. So we're saying, hey, you know what? This is a function called ABC that takes 3 arguments. Curry ABC. So if we do curried 1, 2, 3, you'll just treat those as 3 arguments. Now here where there's 4, it still only takes 3 arguments. That's interesting syntax. I haven't actually run into that in JavaScript where I can put in. Well, I guess, I mean, when I see this, I'm assuming that you're running the function again. So it'd be like this returns a function, and this is invoking that function that's returned. So returns a function, returns the new current function, which it does. Okay. And then this returns an array, which is okay. So that would be sort of the index. Creates a function that accepts arguments of func and either invokes func returning its result if at least arity number of arguments have been provided, or returns a function that accepts the remaining func arguments, and so on. Okay, got it. So in this case, where there's only 1 argument, it'll return a function that takes the next argument, so looking for 2 more, but this only gets 1, so then it returns another version of the function again that takes the last one, and then it becomes 1, 2, 3. So it'll keep doing it until it gets its 3 arguments. That's an odd function. I'm sure there's a purpose for that. That one's why I would want that is unclear. Okay, creates a debounce function that delays invoking func until after you wait milliseconds. So far it sounds like wait interval. And have elapsed since the last time the debounce function was invoked. The debounce function comes with a cancel method to cancel delayed function invocations and a flush method to immediately invoke them. Okay, let's look at the example. Ooh, lots of arguments. So okay, there's the function. Okay, how long you have to wait. An options object. That I'm sure takes all sorts of weird options. So if I were invoking on the leading edge of the timeout, but let's see here. Let's take a look at an example. Okay, so here we're going to say that we're going to resize the window, and that's going to occur, or we're going to call this resize. So let's see here. Okay, yeah, no, got it. This is a function, so this is a jQuery event. So when the window is resized, after 150 milliseconds, run calculate layout. Okay. Got it. So the idea is that it's doing the calculation, but it gives us some time for the user to resize the window. Invoke send mail when clicked. So when the thing is clicked, send mail, but does it after 300 milliseconds? Okay, so it just delays a function. Okay. So kind of like set interval with some extra little fun stuff. Debounce, defer. I'm assuming defer is going to do something very similar. Defers invoking the func until the current call stack has cleared. Any additional arguments are provided to func when it's invoked. Okay, so defer function console.log to invoke func with deferred. Okay, so this basically would wait for everything else that's currently on the stack to resolve, and then, okay, I can see certain situations with that. Invokes func after wait milliseconds. The additional arguments are provided to func when it's invoked. Okay, so same thing like debounce. So we're just saying, hey, run this function after this amount of time and provide it with these arguments. Cool. Flip creates a function that invokes func with arguments reversed. Interesting. So the idea here is I can pass it this arguments, and then it'll actually do the opposite. Okay, so it'll pass in the arguments in the opposite order to the other function. I guess you could create like a reverse function out of it, like this. I mean, I'm sure there's other situations where that might be useful, but they would be very application particular. Memoize. Okay, creates a function that memoizes the result of func. If resolver is provided, it determines a cache key. Okay, I always get a little confused with the memoization. This is a topic that hasn't quite fully, I haven't fully appreciated when I've been reading it, like use memo in React. As far as React hooks go. So let's see here, var values, memoize the values. So that's this. Dot values object. Returns 1 and 2. Returns a new memoize function. Open up whose instance. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what that is. I mean, I see what it's doing. It's saying, okay, hey, we're taking this values function and we're going to memoize it. So that way, whatever comes out of that function gets memoized. But what memoize means, I don't fully appreciate. So it seems like in this case, it's just taking the values, the array. But now it looks like there is a cache of that. And they're putting it in a weak map. Interesting. And again, a map versus a weak map, like it's just a difference in the way they're garbage collected. I think if it's a map, it's automatically garbage collected. A weak map, you have to explicitly remove keys and remove things for it to actually like clean up memory. Negate creates a function that negates the result of the predicate func. The func predicate is invoked with this binding and the arguments of created function. Okay, the predicate to negate, so that's the function. So let's see here, function is even. Okay, filter. Okay, got it. So basically saying, hey, this is this. It just basically is this false. So if is even returns true, which it would for 2, then this function here negate will negate it. So basically, it just kind of flips the results, from my understanding. That's all right. I mean, you can essentially do the same thing with reject, since you have Lodash installed anyways. But I'm sure there's situations where you need to negate something, and you're not necessarily filtering or reducing an array. Once creates a function that is restricted to invoking func once. Repeats calls to the function return the value of the first invocation. The func is invoked with this binding and argument. Okay, so basically it creates a function that you only run once. So say once, you pass in the function you only want run once, and then assign it to a variable, and now you only can use it once. That's pretty straightforward. Creates a function that involves func with its arguments transformed. Okay, sounds on the surface like map, but let's examine. Okay, var func over args. function xy, return xy square doubled. Okay, so it's going to transform the first argument with square. So it's going to run this function on the first argument and run this function on the second argument before the actual function runs, is my understanding here. So, and that basically this creates this function and stores that function here. So then what happens is that 9 gets squared and 3 gets doubled and then gets passed into the function, which just returns the array of both. So that's interesting. Okay, I guess if you wanted to like run a function on the argument, like basically prepare the data as before it goes into the function, that could actually be useful. I mean, you could just put it in the body of the function, but yeah, that could be an interesting way to shorten certain things. Partial creates a function that invokes func with partials prepended to the argument it receives. This method is like bind, except it does not alter the this binding. The partial placeholder value, which defaults to monolithic builds, may be used as a placeholder for partially applied arguments. Okay, let's just take a look at the example. So we have a function called greet that greets a name, say hello, partial. Okay, we are taking the function greet and using the greeting hello. Okay. And we're binding it to Fred, except you're not using this. It just basically looks for that property on Fred. Do we see where Fred was defined? Say hello to Fred. Got it. So the idea is it partially passed an argument. So basically assumes that this is the first argument. So then when you run say hello to, now you just have to define the second argument. So it only takes one argument going forward. So basically it fills in that gap. Partially applied with placeholders. Okay, in this case you could put a placeholder that'll ignore and say, okay, this needs to be replaced with whatever gets passed in. So in this case, we're saying greet is the function. The first argument still needs to be passed in. The second argument will be replaced with Fred. And you can choose how you want to greet Fred. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I can see some potential uses for that. Partial right. This method is like partial, but it starts from the right. Okay, so partial, if I remember right. Okay, let's take a look at here. Partially applied to. Greet hello. Wait, it wasn't partial, which was just a second ago. Yeah. It's the same thing, but starts from the right argument. So that might be an easier way than doing the placeholder. Rearg creates a function that invokes func with arguments arranged according to a specified indexes, where the argument value at the first index is provided as the first argument, the argument value at the second index is provided as the argument at the second index, and so on. Okay, so let's see here. Rearg function ABC. Turn ABC 2 0 1. Okay, so in that case 0 would be C, so it should return, so we put in BCA, so 0C, no, so 2 being passed in is A, so that gets put in first, then 0, which would be B, and 1C. Okay, so basically takes the arguments that are passed in, puts them into an array, and then actually passes them into the function in the order specified by this array. Okay, that's interesting. If you really want to like create, like mess with somebody and create a function that like, why am I putting the arguments in the right order and they're not being processed in the right order? Why? But it does it. You can do it. That's cool. I don't know why. Okay, creates a function that invokes func with this binding. Binding of the created function on arguments from start and beyond the keyword as an array. Let's take a look at the example. So rest function, what names return what names, okay, and the rest. So, and then, okay, I see. So basically what they're saying is that whatever the remaining are, all the remaining arguments will be assigned to the second parameter. So basically hello is hello, and then the second parameter will be names. And it'll, looks like it just automatically iterates over that. Hello, Fred, Barney, and Pebbles. Oh no, it doesn't. Just Fred initial names dot join. Gotcha. Okay. And then here it says the last name. Okay, interesting. So it just basically gives you an array of all the other arguments beyond the first. Spread. Creates a function that invokes func with this binding the create function array arguments, much like function apply. Let's see here how this works. For say spread function who what, return who says what. So you pass in an array, and it takes in the first thing as the first argument. Okay, var numbers, promise.all, promise.resolve, numbers.then, spread, function, xy, return xy. Okay, and I guess the arguments will be passed in by the promises. So it would be 40 and 36, which would be a promise of 76. Okay. Okay, I'm not really seeing the benefit of that. I mean, in the first situation, all you're doing is you're saying you have to pass in the two arguments as an array. Okay. The start position of the spread. Yeah, that seems to be all it's doing. Creates a function that invokes func with this binding of the create function and an array argument, much like function apply. Okay, yeah, basically it's just spreading that array as an argument. That's okay. Throttle creates a throttle function that only invokes func at the most once per every milliseconds. So that's cool. So you can only use it ever so often. So you basically you're specifying, okay, only use this function every this many milliseconds. Yeah, I can get down with that. That's throttle, because maybe you only want it. You have this loop that's basically constantly looping to do a thing, but you only want it done ever so often. So you do this. That's cool. Creates a function that accepts up to one argument, ignoring any additional arguments. Creates a function that accepts up to one argument, ignoring any additional arguments. So you're just creating, okay. I don't see why you would need a function to do that. Again, I think there was more restrictions on JavaScript and way functions and arguments worked once upon a time. So probably, again, I just don't appreciate this much as it was before, when JavaScript was older. Creates a function that provides a value to wrapper as its first argument. Any additional arguments provided to the function are appended to those provided to the wrapper. The wrapper is invoked with this binding of the created function. So let's take a look at an example. Wrap function text. So let's see here, that's being stored in P. Fred, Barney, and Pebbles. Func text. Value to wrap. Okay, and then wrapper identity function, the wrapper. So it's going to run escape. And basically pass an escape there. So I don't think we've discussed the escape method yet. So that's why this one doesn't quite. But it just seems it means to, what they're saying is just to ignore the P's, so that way it prints HTML as text instead of actually being parsed as HTML. Okay, so basically just saying, hey, what I want you to do is take whatever the result of this function is, the value to wrap, which is this function. So we're going to return this function. I'm assuming we're just taking this function and passing it as an argument into the wrap function. That's weird. Lang methods. Okay, so I think we're done with function methods. So I'm going to make this another video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one. Ciao. Again, make sure to check out my website, alexmercedcoder.com.